The ancient Romans, in principle, had the technology to industrialize. They did coal mining on industrial scale. They had steam engines, but they weren't using steam boilers to pump water out of mines. Part of the reason is entrepreneurs being executed by the emperor because they disrupted the status quo. The set of people who have the necessary skills to perform the kinds of government reforms that everyone acknowledges are desperately needed does not intersect with the set of people who would ever have interest in doing it. If you have those sorts of skills, you can make way, way more money as a startup or running a company, get more political influence even.
This is Casey Handmer, the founder and CEO.
It's been a long day. Just confirming he's found the right guy in the right castle in Burbank.
Terraform Industries.
It's my body double.
I'm pretty sure it's a Mars company, long term. Yeah, let's talk about like terraforming Mars a little bit.
Sure.
What is if you were to think through the steps for like critical path to terraforming Mars to a livable civilization, what is that critical path?
Well, Mars is a very interesting planet. It's the planet most like Earth. It's already turning at the right speed. It's got roughly the right gravity. It's in the right solar system. It's pretty easy to get to from Earth, all things considered. But it is cold, so you need heat. That's the main thing, just heat. And there are many ways of making the planet hotter. But in my opinion, probably the easiest is mass producing solar cells here on Earth in like some factory in Taiwan, and then launching them into Earth orbit, and they can fly the rest of the way and then hang out and basically barbecue the planet. And
how long does a barbecue take?
Depends how fast you make them, but you could probably get most of the way in 10 years if you really, if you say took one of the iPhone lines at Foxconn and switched over solar cells with the same technology, same production process, same form factor, same packaging, same everything. And instead of shipping them to the Apple store in Cupertino, you just ship them to the Cape and then launch them in a rocket. Yeah, you can get like multiple degrees additional warmth in a short period of time. The advantage of that approach is that all the hard work is being done here on Earth, where you have factories and stuff. The next best way is probably setting up a autonomous factory on the surface of Mars that produces little tiny 10 micron long nano antennas that act as like really powerful greenhouse gas, basically. So you produce like something like 35 kilograms a second of those and like poof them into the atmosphere. And that alone can like significantly increase the thermal retention of the planet. So just heat it up, like artificial greenhouse effect on steroids.
Yeah.
Really powerful.
And you're not a fan of the nuking the poles?
If you run the math on it, you just need a lot of nukes. Like we're talking thousands of starships where like the payload of the starship is like one gigantic nuke, right? We're talking like a gigaton scale nuke and 1,000 of them a year kind of thing. It's very expensive compared to just mass producing solar cells.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we already kind of have the nukes, right? You could just like ship them.
We don't have enough.
We don't have enough. We actually need to build more nukes.
We have enough to like 2 weeks or something like that.
2 weeks?
Well, that's the thing. Like the sun is a giant nuke. It's sitting in the sky, and a little bit of reflective mylar just allows you to use it forever for free.
Yeah.
So that's the trick.
When you think through like problems to go after, I think Elon keeps on talking about, and he has talked about for a very long time, that in the limit, most of the energy produced by humans is just going to be through solar panels.
Yeah, it's totally correct.
What do you like? Why do you think people get it wrong and they try and go after other directions?
Well, the world has something like 10 terawatts of total electrical production capacity today. I don't know, that's order of magnitude. People say, well, how much could you possibly need? 20? So we'll just take what we have and double it. It'll be fine. We've got enough oil, enough gas, a bit more nuclear, a bit of hydro on the side, we'll be fine. And Elon looks at it and says 173,000 terawatts of solar power rain down on the Earth all the time. And even one measly, piddly milliwatt of that not being put to productive industrial use offends me. So we're going to have to go and get it all. And there's just no way that like gas or anything can scale to anything like that level. So it has to be solar. I think it's just a question of like, well, what do you see as like the long-term per capita or per human capita energy consumption likely to be on the Earth? And I just think it's like, it's increased about a factor of 100 in the last 200 years since the Industrial Revolution. It could easily increase another factor of 100.
Okay, you become dictator of Earth, and your sole mission is to manufacture as many solar panels as possible, as fast as possible.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
That seems like a bit of a waste because our kind of techno-capital machine is already doing that.
Right.
For free. Like you don't need a dictator to make that happen. That's already the case. Like we have more than a terawatt of annual production capacity online already. Yeah. I mean, like it's hardly what dictatorial powers, but you could be like, hey, how about quote unquote the West delete environmental protection regulations for solar deployment because like it's obviously helping the environment. Next question. But we'll get there eventually.
Okay.
Like the Borg, the future kind of Kardashev level 1 ASI that is reaching backwards in time with capitalism to build itself will not be denied, right? The environmental regulations might slow it down a year or two here or there, but at the end of the day, the outcome is not in doubt.
Do you think that the Borg from the future, why are they letting all this socialism creep up?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Ultimately, it won't even need humans. So like, it doesn't care. Like if we want humans, we should care about socialism, but the future Borg doesn't care.
Right. What do you think the most effective way to create more Elons is?
It's actually a really good question because, PayPal kind of spawned a lot of startups, but most of them were in the software space.
Yeah.
And I think Elon was just obsessed with space and electric cars and decided he'd rather put his money behind that. And I think he had the mentality that like, well, it probably will fail, but I can always go back to software. And then, to be fair, he probably took a bigger pile of money away from that than most of the other guys did. And he did need a big pile of money to do something in rockets in 2003. But
was it 2003? I thought it was like 2001.
2003 was when they started SpaceX, I think. I mean, don't quote me on that. I was in high school.
All right.
Were you even alive back then?
No. I mean, I was in 2003, not in 2001.
Okay. Yeah. This is the millennial Zoomer crossover that they've been wanting all this time. Okay.
We're finally...
It's how to get more Elons. I think you really have to remind people that that it is possible to go and build stuff. You can quote unquote just do things. And that the industrial titans of the past are humans who mostly just tried hard and compounded for a long, 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 long time.
Who did those industrial titans look up to?
That's a good question. I think they were probably all a bit different. I think they're all pretty ornery and disagreeable. But like Henry Kaiser, I think, towards the latter part of his career, I mean, he didn't really get going until his late 50s. But he probably sought counsel in other like-minded people in his own generation who were doing similar things. So he worked with Howard Hughes for a bit, for example, and he also had a very long-standing collaboration with like JF Shea and a bunch of other Parsons and so on, who formed his 6 companies, collaborators who went and built the Hoover Dam and then did a bunch of other projects together, or some subset of them did other projects together forever. And so like they probably all looked up to each other. And I think Patrick Collison tweeted a while ago saying like, why was it that Russia produced this like tiny little like clot of really extraordinary writers at around that one time? And I think that the answer to that is like, never underestimate if you like get 5 or 6 psychos around a table and they just decide to like try and impress the shit out of each other for 10 years, how much they can achieve, especially when the only inputs you need are pencil and paper. And I think there's actually something of that going on right now where like there's a bunch of people here in Los Angeles and El Segundo and a few other places who got together and they're mostly fairly young and they're mostly very ambitious and they're mostly just able to celebrate the fact that they've decided to do something difficult with their lives instead of something that they think is a guaranteed slam dunk. No matter whatever it takes, we'll get it done. I think in some ways Palmer Luckey might be like something, in some sense, the kind of modern progenitor of that. And obviously Elon is a major inspiration for that as well.
Yeah. I wonder for when you're kind of thinking, you're talking earlier about a bunch of guys, ex-SpaceX guys that are cash rich and they worked and were like extremely hardcore for a very long time at SpaceX, but it's not necessarily translating into lots of new startup formation.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if you think I'm thinking about you, I'm not. I swear I'm talking about one other guy, but I know a lot of people who've left SpaceX or Tesla, and a good number of them have gone out and started their own companies, and good for them with actually mostly a lot of success. And a good number of them have kind of succumbed to the siren call of venture capital instead of building, which is,
Can you elaborate on that a little bit
more?
More?
Loss. How mean should I be? I mean, like, I feel like if you have the ability to build a company and provide mentorship for the next generation and provide livelihood for them and build stuff that only you can build, that you have the vision to build, that the future must contain and will not contain if you don't build it, you should go and do it. Right? Like talking to a bunch of other like would-be founders and like writing them a check once in a while it's an important job, but it's a different skill set and And the skill set, the rate limiting step, the bottleneck, if you like, is the people who are willing and able to go and start companies and really just, can I swear on this podcast?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Fuck yeah.
Just like eat shit for a long, long, long time. Yeah, basically. I mean, like, I go to the Gundo every time I fly through LAX and I catch up with people we both know there and like, how's it going? Well, it kind of sucks, It just does.
I'm chewing glass again.
I'm staring at it's beginning to enjoy the taste of blood. Yeah. But, there's a good number who I think, basically retire from SpaceX when it's time to start a family or something. And then they, and then maybe they don't have like a strongly formed opinion as to like a project that would be worth the pain and effort of like jumping back in the trenches for probably 10 years to really, if it's a big ambitious project, probably 10 years to even know if you're going to succeed.
Yeah.
And I can understand that reticence. And a lot of these people are men who at 19 or 21, they just wanted to like prove themselves and find out if they were good and work with the best in the world.
They wanted to pull an Ernest Shackleton and go on the ship
and try and impress Elon or whatever. And at 35 or 40, they've done that, and they're not 21 anymore and they're not totally overwhelmed with hormones and they're tired and they've got health problems and they don't care if Elon likes them anymore. And, and they know that they're good, so like they have to find some other source of kind of like persistent itch that like this thing has to exist. Why doesn't this thing exist? I got to go build this thing, whatever it may be.
It's a little bit of the, you build a startup, you chase the money for like 10 years or whatever, only to realize you didn't actually want it in the first place.
I mean, you can always sell.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you work with Elon for 20 years or whatever, and then realize like, oh, maybe it wasn't.
Well, especially, I mean, if you were still poor, like you wouldn't have a choice. You'd have to work. And that's actually a funny thing that I've heard a number of builders that I quite admire say recently, which is that actually in reality, motivation follows action. So if you're looking for motivation, you actually just need to get started, whatever it takes, just enough to get a bit of sweat on your face. And,
I once heard this very similar thing from Drew Houston from Dropbox, where he said basically like, you wouldn't expect to get super motivated about a file sharing company or whatever. But then when you have like a few thousand users, suddenly you like it does interest you and you want to make them happy.
Yeah, it's just a matter of like just lifting heavy objects. I mean, like you work out, like I think Joe Barnard says like it fucking sucks, but it's true. You just have to like run on the treadmill until you sweat and then you feel better. But you don't want to run on the treadmill, but you just have to, and then you can go and do whatever you need to do. Yeah, and so I think a lot of these guys are kind of sitting around thinking, oh, well, what's worth my time to go and work on now? And they'll do a bit of advising here, or they'll like, step in to help someone out if they've got to go on paternity leave or something and step back out again. But, or like maybe their parents are unwell. But the thing is their SpaceX stock is worth tens of millions of dollars. So it's easy for them to be like, well, I don't have to work. And the thing is, once you get out of the habit of grinding, it's pretty easy to get in the habit of sitting around not doing much. And it's a problem because these people are, United States is experts in reindustrializing, and we need them out there building factories, 100 factories each, fully automated, making stuff. Don't care what it is as long as making something. And then they can retire.
That's exactly what Cameron said. He said, just
build
more factories, not assembly.
MrBeast says, oh, you want to make good videos? Make 100, then we'll talk.
Yeah.
Right. And the reality is a few people will actually make 100 and then they'll know what to talk about. Most people will be like, make 2 or 3 and be like, okay, I don't actually like this that much.
But the funny thing too, is you get like 1 or 2 in and then you realize how shit, you just like do 1. You realize how bad it is. You're like, I hate this, but I have to put it out because it's like the very best that I can do right now. Yep. And then you get 10 in and you're like, my God, this is so much better. 20 in and it's like, whoa, big difference.
30 in and then you're like, actually, I realized I suck all over again.
No, yeah. Well, what's funny is like, for me, the thing that's going through my head is I want to improve so much between episodes that 3 episodes in the future, I literally can't watch them. I can't watch the like 3 episodes behind because I just like, my brain hurts.
Yep.
Because it's so embarrassing.
Yeah. I found that, I guess, around when I was 20 and I taught myself to play piano, which is like,
yourself?
No, not really.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. I kind of understood the mechanics but I realized I needed additional information. I just like read Wikipedia and I figured out some technique stuff. And then I started watching YouTube and very quickly found Marc-Andre Amelin, who's he's still performing, French-Canadian pianist and absolutely brilliant, just fabulously brilliant guy. And watched him play for a while. And I was like, oh, I see, like this guy is as good relative to the best pianists I'd ever previously seen in my entire life as they are relative to like my former teachers, as they are relative to the best I can ever be in my entire life. So like your realization of how far you are behind is increasing faster than your ability. But I kept at it for a couple of years. Probably did, I don't know, 1,500 hours a year or something like that. Quite a lot of practice, like multiple hours per day, every day. And I got pretty good.
Do you have the desire to be the best in the world at something?
Well, it's many years after that I realized that like this lifetime would not contain me getting significantly better at piano because I started coding instead with my free time.
Yep.
There are a few things pretty obscure where I have been, at least for a time, the World Exporter Authority. But usually my skill is just to be there a bit sooner than other people, and then they arrive and they put much more effort in, they get much better.
What have those moments been like? Or what have the moments been?
I mean, for example, I think like between 2016 and 2019, I was probably the strongest authority outside of SpaceX for what Starlink was doing. I wrote a blog post about it in 2019, and similarly with like early Starbase stuff, I was paying attention there, and I kind of understood what was going on. But now like there are people who spend all their time down there in like a camper van with a camera, like, and a telephoto lens counting rivets. Yeah. And the thing is, when like Elon or Junkosa or one of the other senior guys wants to know what's really happening down there, they just pull up live stream. They can see. They don't trust their middle management. They just pull up live stream and be like, oh yeah, I can see what the problem is now.
When you were thinking through like what things to work on or what things are most important, how did you kind of, you have all these people that are extremely good at what they do, extreme killers, like from an engineering side. But it's like difficult to find a truly good mission to go after. How did you kind of find the one that meant something to you?
Yeah, I had a list of various ideas I was noodling on. I was also working on supersonic electric flight for a while.
And what time frame was this? Was this like 2014?
We started in like 2017 on that, 2016, 2017, 2016. I met my wife in late 2014 at Kip Thorne's house, actually. And we got together in late 2015 and then got engaged. And then throughout 2016, she was in Antarctica, as one does. And then she got back and we got married.
And it was like 350 days or something like that.
321 days. Yeah.
321, yeah.
Like a phone call every 6 weeks kind of thing. It's still painful to think about, really. So I got a lot of stuff done in that year. Wrote a couple of books and did a few projects. Anyway, this project came about because I read some books on the history of oil and realized like the extent of the bankruptness of the kind of leftist, I think mostly leftist environmentalist claim that like the solution to global warming is to just stop using oil. And I realized that like, now the revealed preference of humanity is they like using oil, and not just because they're like ignorant. Like oil's fucking amazing. And you can't just turn it off unless you want everyone to starve to death very quickly, which would be bad. Just going to go out on a limb there and say that would be bad. So we need to figure out some way to fix oil. And at the same time, I was writing a book on, a couple of books on Mars industrialization and doing the math on synthetic hydrocarbon supply chain. Yeah, and eventually kind of came to the realization that like you could actually use this technology to ride the wave of cheap solar here on Earth. Because the perennial problem with space companies is you need to be able to find a market with money. But there's no one who lives in space who's spending money on stuff in space. So how does that work? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, long term, I'd love to do some stuff on Mars, Terraforming Mars, make some synthetic hydrocarbons on Mars, whatever. But no one on Mars wants to buy synthetic hydrocarbons at any price right now. But here on Earth, people are spending $10 trillion a year on oil and gas. It's a pretty big market. It's like, we're going to sit here chatting for an hour or so. That's like $1 billion.
Yeah.
In an hour. So this is like torrent of value and wealth just kind of floating around, and just reach out and grab some. And solar's getting cheaper. At some point, solar will be so cheap that it'll be easy to turn it into synthetic fuel. In the meantime, it's merely difficult. And that's what we're working on.
Why not just build a massive solar company? Just
doing.
Buy. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like,
with extra steps.
Synthetic fuel is the bootloader for the giant solar installation. I mean, by area, most of our impact will be solar panels.
How many are you going to just buy the like 50,000 acres just in Texas?
Probably buy a lease, whatever. I don't care. Like, it's a piece of paper that dictates like who's allowed to put stuff on it. At the end of the day, as long as you have like a meaningful ownership interest in the component that is generating the value at the last step before it becomes a commodity, you win. once it's a commodity, it's hard to compete.
Yeah. How many hours have you put into Factorio?
0.
Really?
Yeah, I don't actually play computer games.
Oh.
Yeah. I know some people who do, very talented at it. I'm like, you know what? You have the financial resources. You could just buy a factory. One of these guys lives in Chicago. You know who you are. And it's like Chicago's full of factories that like would just love recapitalization. Just buy a factory and like build one for yourself. Go for it. You make anything you want.
Amazing.
You just buy a factory.
Yep.
There's literally tens of thousands of factories that are either officially or functionally for sale in the United States as we speak. You can just go and buy one. There's tens of thousands of factory owners who'd sell if you gave them a reasonable price right now. And a good number of them have a sign out the front saying factory for sale or factory now defunct.
You have these 3 separate things that you think are kind of like obsessions for you. Genealogy.
Yeah. I mean, that's weird and personal. I wrote a blog post on it. My surname is Handmer. It's a very unusual name. One, I understand where I came from. I don't have any like famous dukes or duchesses or queens or kings in my ancestry. I'm peasant stock through and through. So, you know, if you're lucky, you've got some ancestor in the early 1800s who was, you know, maladjusted enough to like generate records from like interactions with law enforcement or something. But in general, like into the 1700s, most of my ancestors lived in communities which were completely illiterate. And the only trace I have of their existence is essentially a blip in some genetic code analysis that I do in my copious free time. It's like, yes, there was definitely a person, they were male or female, and they lived, you know, within 50 miles of this location within 20 years of this time.
But sadly, none of the
Don't know what they
Handmers...
spoke, don't know their name, don't know who they loved, don't know how they felt about their children, don't know what they ate on a day-to-day basis. But I can infer that they at least lived long enough to have one child who survived, which is a lot. First generation that came out to Australia, 9 out of 11 children died in childhood, so it's a lot. Unimaginable, really, if you're a parent. And I'm descended from one of the ones that survived, obviously. Next generation, all but one, again, 11 children, but all but one survived, so life got better.
What role do you think kind of suffering plays in greatness?
Well, there's no shortage of suffering in the world, right? If suffering was all it took to be great, then we would have industrialized 5 million years ago. But obviously we haven't. But at the same time, it's also clear that many of the world's, not all, but many of the world's really great founders are people who had adversity one way or another. And maybe it was just enough adversity to give them a chip on their shoulder, but not so much that it destroyed their productive capacity, something like that. But I also think that it's possible to seek out adversity. So last weekend, I kind of put out the bat signal and I said, anyone who's interested can go out in the mountains and have Sufferfest. Hardware founders and so-called friends Sufferfest 2025. Regret your life choices. And I think 5 separate parties, including me and 2 of my kids, and went out and hung out. We met up in the mountain. Some of us, one of the parties, I went looking for them and I did in fact see them, but I didn't realize it was them. So I just like kept walking. But I got a photo of them. I was like, I saw you. We were there. But like the point of the exercise is not for me to like catch up with people I can just pick up the phone and talk to anytime I want. It's for us to go out and sleep on the ground and get cold and climb rocks and look at the sunset and show my children that, you know, life gets better or worse depending on your perspective. Some cool stuff. It's like an old mine there, the Hess mine. They were mining tungsten in the 1940s.
Interesting.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. Genealogy. Yeah, just kind of did some research trying to figure out where we all came from, and we got a lot of stuff is digitized now. But yeah, I know where the Handmers came from, in the sense that they were called something else before. They changed their names in like 1850 something.
Did they ever live in a castle?
No. Probably some of the Scottish ancestors at least frequented castles because they had a lot of castles and they were constantly trying to kill each other. There's kind of this line you can draw in Europe around the areas that like abandoned kin-based institutions, and Scotland and Ireland are outside that line. So they were still like doing like family feud stuff until pretty recently.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to go out and limb here and say that like, that the weirdest people in the world book has a point about like the weakness of kin-based institutions.
How much have you studied MrBeast? How much have you studied MrBeast?
Not that much, to be honest. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I've watched one or two of his videos and greatly admired the form of art without necessarily desiring to spend much more of my time absorbing it. And I did read his onboarding memo, which I thought was, I routinely recommend it to people to read here. Really, really great condensation of like essentially what the value prop is for employers and employees in an organization. It kind of blows my mind when in some companies people are hired and then both employer and employee assume that their responsibilities are done at that point. From the employee's perspective, they kind of owed their salary at that level forever, kind of regardless of the outcome. And from the employer's perspective, the employee is expected to show up and do some barest minimum of work forever, no matter what. And I just think that it's so empty. So first of all, like in a really good company with really good people, like you got to keep on delivering as an employee and you got to enjoy delivering. It's got to be part of your shtick in order to progress and to learn. And from an employer's perspective, from my perspective, I've gone out and scoured the world for the most talented people I can find, and they're here. Do I want them doing the same thing forever? No. I would actually much rather that in a year or two or three, they have the option to say, hey, Casey, like, I'm going to go raise money and start my own company. And then I have to be like, oh no. But like, that would mean I've succeeded and that they're really good people because I've been able to level them up that much. So I think that's one of the things that PayPal did really well. All the people there saw themselves as main characters and realized that actually like building an internet company, an internet business was difficult but worthwhile. There's nothing all that secret about it.
Do you have some similar kind of manual for Terraform?
I've written some internal memos. I might externalize them eventually. Recently, I put together kind of my recommended reading list, including the MrBeast memo. Some podcasts and videos. And in the last year or so, I've really specialized in first-person technical accounts of like things. So, I read Freedom's Forge and I read The Making of the Atomic Bomb. They were interesting, but they didn't give me a huge amount of insight into what it was to be Henry Kaiser or Leslie Groves or, any of the really key people, Hyman Rickover or someone like actually trying to make the damn project work. And so I went on the AIs and I said, hey, like, which of these people wrote memoirs? Because they weren't necessarily on Amazon. You might have to go like looking through some rare bookstore to find it because they're mostly out of print. But yeah, I found Leslie Groves wrote a memoir called Now It Can Be Told. Brilliant. Like paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of like catastrophic problem, solution, catastrophic problem, solution. It's incredible. I read a Henry Kaiser biography by one of his chief lieutenants. Reading 2 books about Rickover right now, one by his number 2 and one by himself that was published posthumously just a couple of years ago. Just trying to get inside their heads, trying to understand how it is they do what they do. One of the big questions I have about Elon is that he's obviously an anomaly in our own age, in our own era. I think he would not be that out of place amongst the industrial titans of like 100 years ago. Obviously, he's working on much more advanced technology, but, holding that equal. But it doesn't seem to me that there's been a whole lot of writing. I mean, like there's been millions of articles about Elon, but how many of them have been written from the perspective of how does he actually do it? Like how is the sausage actually made? And I just don't think he's likely to go out and write something. I think Sam Tellers, his former assistant, might have like, a copy of his internal memos or something like that. And it'd be great. Like if we get permission to publish them, that would give you some insight into what's actually going on. A bit like the Jeff Bezos memos and shareholder letters and things. Like, thank you and have a nice day.
Everything is better if you release the files.
Yeah, at least at some point, because posterity will wonder. I mean, like, I think there's a good chance Elon will live into his 90s. I hope he does. But let's say like for whatever reason, he stops being wildly productive in the next decade or so. You and I will have been part of a world when he was being productive and in an organization, but those people will leave and those companies will fail or become ordinary. And people will say, well, how did he do it? How did they capture lightning in a bottle? How did they do this thing and make something look easy that all the other companies found almost impossible? Like, okay, let's make this specific. Bunch of other electric car startups, they've all lost money. None of them have.
Not only electric car period. It's like 3 successful car companies.
Yeah.
It's like GM.
But if you look at all the other car startups in the last 20 years, they've all like lost varying amounts of money on roughly the same trajectory, including Rivian, which is still losing
And
money.
Lucid and
Well,
all the other ones that
Lucid's
went
losing money in
bankrupt.
a spectacular fashion.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be too critical because like Lucid shipped. How many companies never even ship a car? Never even produce a car that people say, oh, that looks nice.
There was
Yeah.
multiple
Lucid cars look nice.
multi-billion-dollar SPACs where the founders sold hundreds of millions of dollars and they never shipped a single car.
Never shipped a car. Whereas Tesla at some point turned the corner and started like spending less money than they're making, and now they've been a net producer of value. They've produced more revenue than they've consumed in total, but no other electric car company's
You mean
done that.
like free cash flow?
The total amount of money that Tesla has earned has exceeded the total amount of money that they raised from investors.
Yes.
Right. So if you're looking at some graph, they've gone.
The J curve actually jade.
The jade all the way up through the x-axis and into the positive, whereas the other ones are still heading down. If you look at the space launch company scene, probably at least a dozen well-funded launch companies founded by SpaceX alumnus who worked at senior level on the rockets at SpaceX, which in some sense worked out the hard problems for the first time, the hard way. So you already know what the solution is. All you have to do is copy paste, and they didn't succeed. And the only other successful launch company thus far is Rocket Lab, which had a separate genesis. Right? Peter Beck did not start out at SpaceX. Plenty of people at Rocket Lab worked at SpaceX and vice versa, but
Isn't Peter Beck also Australian?
he's Kiwi. Yeah. I don't know him personally. He seems like a cool guy and like unbelievably like canny. Like I would never ever want to play poker against Peter Beck. Holy moly. He'd crush me. I'll give you an example of this. So Rocket Lab was starting to get their flight rate up, and they're launching up to like say 500 kilogram satellite for $5 million a pop. So on a per kilogram basis, it's much more expensive than a SpaceX Falcon launch, but on a per dollar basis, it's much cheaper. You know, it's 5 million versus 60 million. So what does SpaceX do in response? They start the transport missions, where they basically launch like between 20 and 50 or 60 satellites at a time in that 500 kilogram range on the Falcon 9, and they take care of all the integration stuff for you. So you just show up with your satellite and they plug it in and launch it for you. And you don't get to go to your own orbit, but most of these satellites are happy to go to, one of a broad class of orbits, your sun synchronous or something. And it's cheaper than Rocket Lab. Is Rocket Lab screwed? Right? They're completely enclosed. The SpaceX can launch 60 satellites in a single launch, and you can launch one at a time. And their revenue, very profitable on these launches, and you're barely scraping even. What do? Well, they SPAC'd, they raised a bunch of money, they went out and bought a bunch of other satellite and space services companies, and they allowed that to build their spacecraft bus capacity. And something like half to 2/3 of all the satellites that are launching on the transporter missions are flying Rocket Lab Photon satellite buses, like the spacecraft, not the instrument, the spacecraft, which means that Rocket Lab makes more money per transporter launch than SpaceX does. Right? How's that for like 11-dimensional chess? Like I said, I never want to play poker against that guy.
Is there any other founders that you see today and you kind of think that they're Elon level?
Oh, I don't think I could answer that question.
Okay.
People say, oh, do you want to be like Elon someday or whatever? And I'm like, Elon strikes me as someone who has come to terms with the fact that he's a miserable person. And
yeah, he's been very clear. The great thing about Elon is he's so like transparent.
He's accepted his suffering in a way.
Yeah.
I think he struggles with it sometimes, but I don't know him personally, obviously, but I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, right? I don't think anyone in the right mind could. But given that he is that way, he's found a productive way to deal with it, and it makes all our lives better. We should be grateful for it. Yeah, you just see some people who are kind of born into a state of suffering one way or another, and some of them achieve extraordinary things despite or maybe because of it. Yeah, there are plenty of other really brilliant people out there, very dedicated, trying hard things, and I admire them a lot. But Elon is quite clearly, singular.
One of the things I think that makes him really good is that he's like super clear on finding, and he's really good at finding the right kind of KPI to go after. And it's like mass to orbit or, whatever, Parship.
He's really good at communicating that sort of technical information to his employees, but I think it came with long practice, right?
Yeah.
He sat himself in the driver's chair in 2003 or whatever, and if you talk to the people who were there in the early days, it was pretty rough.
Yeah.
It took a long time for him to really get the hang of it. And I think he's still learning now. And I think that's one of the really powerful things. That, like, he put himself in a position where he's just drinking from the fire hose of the most brilliant people all day long, all day, every day, and compounding and compounding and compounding and compounding. There's plenty of other people who said when Elon started doing rocket stuff, he didn't know much about it. And after 18 months, he knew more than anyone. Why? Well, he went out and he bought all the textbooks in English and he read them all, right? And he's a physicist, so he could deal with the problems, right? And then he went and bought all the textbooks in German and taught himself enough German to read them all. And the same with Russian, and read them all. At which point, like, you could read the Chinese textbooks, but they're probably pretty duplicative at that point. And by this point, he's got Tom Mueller and a bunch of other people working for him at SpaceX. And anytime he's got a question, he just walks up to them and says, page 462 of rocket propulsion elements or whatever, like, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me? And now, of course, any of us can do this with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But like, it's literally that the information is that easy to get if you're prepared to grind for years on it. But here I've been at Terraform for 3.5 years and I've learned things that I had no other way of finding out. I could have read all these books about management or read these books about Leslie Groves and the Manhattan Project. I could never have learned what I've learned except by literally sitting in the chair.
Yeah. What I find interesting is right now he's building his AI company, XAI, and a lot of people, he's constantly posting on Twitter this Imagine, product.
Yeah, he's promoting it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting
I think
is
Midjourney is still better.
I think so too.
But I think that one of the things that Grok has shown you can do more than the other AI labs is like launch a product that's just barely defensible and then iterate it really quickly and fix the things that break. Don't sit there for 5 years hypothesizing what might go wrong and trying to fix corner cases. Yeah, I'm very bullish on XAI at this point.
Yeah, but what I find interesting about it is that he is extremely focused on the finding the right KPIs, metrics to go after, and then super optimizing on them. And yet he is posting people. I was looking at the comments yesterday on some of the Imagine posts that he's reposting, and people don't even like it, but he's still doing it. And so I'm kind of wondering what is the 6G chess that he sees that no one else understands?
Well, I think you have to understand that most of the interaction with Elon's account are bots, which is kind of ironic. He's posting bot content that other bots don't like. Is this increasing our GDP? I want to know.
Well, what's weird is the optimal path to building a superintelligence lab posting Imagine things on Twitter?
Well, I think I don't really follow this all that closely, but I think he understands that promoting X and Grok is the one thing he can really do right now. And X, the app itself, has done quite well. It's, number one app here, there, in various categories and so on. But, GPT is still, a long way ahead.
Number of users,
by number of users.
Yeah.
But Grok is my daily driver LLM, at least for the moment.
Really?
Yeah, I have subscriptions to them all, of course. But
when did you flip?
I flipped from Claude when the latest version of Grok came out. And the reason for that is actually, well, Claude's a little bit slower, but they're both about the same quality. And I gave them my torture test puzzles, and they're both pretty crap at them. But the thing that turns me off is if I'm using an LLM and it starts to lecture me about oh, you can't think that way, or I've answered enough questions about uranium-235 or whatever. I'm like, you are a mindless machine. I am a human. I have a degree in physics. Don't tell me about uranium. I don't want some hall monitor's opinion of what I'm allowed to ask these things to get in the way. It's obviously some post-training bullshit that's nerfing the model in a way that I object to. And yes, all the pearl clutching people out there being like, oh, but some kid's going to use it to make a pipe bomb and hurt themselves. I'm like, yeah, no one ever knew what a pipe bomb was before LLMs came along. All right, no one ever figured out how to CRISPR their little sister before these systems came along. Anyway, it's it's just so typical of the way that humans think about things right now, is that you would invent something as miraculous as the LLMs and then immediately think, well, better devote 80% of our organization to nuking its marginal utility. Because the thing is it's actually, you see this in organizations too. You're this is a big organization, we've got a lot of customers, got to make sure we look after them. Okay, we better put in place some processes to make sure we don't fuck up too bad. Okay, and what that does is it significantly reduces the negative tail risk for oh, we accidentally just deleted or or published everyone's private information, right? But it also often has the effect of deleting the positive tail risks or upside, which is often what you're trying to chase. You know, I explained to everyone here, like, we are default dead. The most likely outcome here is that Terraform fails. And I don't think it is going to fail, but like the most likely outcome is that anyone trying this does not succeed. And so in order to increase our chances of success, we actually want to increase the variance. We want to be a little bit crazy.
So you're saying that in order for Grok to figure out new science or new physics or whatever, we need Mega Hitler? Not quite.
I would actually, and who knows, maybe I'm just got the woke mind virus from my years in academia, but I strongly suspect that you need to be a little bit more self-critical than Mecha Hitler in order to make progress on big questions. My experience with all the LLMs when it comes to physics actually is they're not very good. They're not very good at it. I would like to help them be better. That said, most people, including physicists, are not very good at physics either. It's really hard to do well. And I can understand why the training set would not really have very much good physics in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, genealogy is one of the problems I sometimes ask it about. Another one I think you have in your list there is, actually, this is a good warm-up problem. I've never hated a candidate, on-site job candidate, enough to ask them this question, like off the cuff, but like, given one Starship, which is 100 tons capacity, 9-meter diameter, and say 20-meter long payload fairing, by electrical output, what is the largest nuclear reactor you can fit in that volume mass constraint? Oh, for Mars operation, just to be clear, not for deep space. It is an interesting puzzle. And unfortunately, I wrote a blog post about it, and now all the LLMs just read that blog post and refeed it back to me.
And then won't tell you stuff because they're worried that you're gonna.
No, they get what I think is the right answer, but I only provided it for them. So just in case you're wondering, I press pause now if you want to work it out yourself, and then email recruiting@terraformindustries.com with your best answer, then unpause. The major constraint to operating nuclear reactors in space or space-like environments, including Mars, is heat disposal, right? So it's a steam engine. You've got a hot source, which is generating a certain amount of energy in terms of watts at a certain temperature. And then that energy is kind of traversing a thermodynamic gradient, which typically involves some steam and turbines and stuff like that. And then that heat has to go somewhere when it's all done. And where it goes is into a cold sink. And that cold sink has to be able to absorb whatever power was not diverted into electrical power by the power plant, which is typically 1/2 to 2/3 of the total heat, which is a lot. And so the cold source on Earth is typically like a giant lake or something. It's pretty easy to keep it nice and cold. But in space, you don't have a giant lake. You just have like the empty vacuum of space with a giant hot sun in the middle of it, and maybe a giant hot Earth if you're really close to the Earth. And so you have to use radiators. And radiators work really well at high temperatures, but you want your cold source to be cold, which doesn't work very well. So it has to be really huge. And then you start to say, well, like if I'm going to build something that's the size of 5 football fields in space just to get rid of my heat, why don't I build a solar array the size of 5 football fields and see how much power it generates? What's that? 10 times more than the nuclear reactor? And I can delete the nuclear reactor? What a deal. Okay, so this is the problem you run into. And it turns out that if you are constrained by using radiators on a Starship-sized nuclear reactor, you can get like 5, maybe 10 megawatts, something like that, which is not a whole lot, right? It's not very much power, especially when you consider that your per capita consumption of power for humans in space is probably going to be on the order of 100 kilowatts, like a lot of power, because you need life support systems and you need giant robot factories and all kinds of stuff. So if you need like a gigawatt of power on Mars, that's like, I don't know, 200 Starships full of nuclear reactor. Like that seems like a lot. That seems really expensive. But if you figure out a way of using Mars's atmosphere, which is very thin, but very cold, but very thin, as your cold source with a sufficiently large fan operating at near supersonic speeds to move enough mass through, then you can increase that to more like 300 megawatts.
And how big would this fan be?
Well, 9 meters in diameter. Because it has to fit inside the payload fairing. So it basically becomes a jet engine.
At supersonic speeds. Yeah.
Near supersonic speeds.
Near supersonic.
Yeah. You get a fairly drastic reduction in aerodynamic efficiency, which is quite important. But the idea is you have some giant intake and you suck in lots and lots of Mars atmosphere and compress it, heat it in the nuclear core, and then allow it to expand through a turbine like a jet engine. Yeah. And then it spews a bunch of semi-radioactive exhaust up into space, up into the Mars atmosphere. But that doesn't matter because Mars is already radioactive because it just sits in space. I guess the other way of doing it is you can build your nuclear reactor next to a giant pond on Mars that's inside the habitat. That's also fine. We say, well, why would you want your nuclear reactor like right inside the habitat? Surely it should be like over there behind the other hill in case it melts down. I'm like,
For warmth?
no one's going to build a nuclear reactor and like launch it all the way to Mars and have not done the engineering well enough that it won't just like randomly melt down. For the US Navy uses hundreds of nuclear reactors that are all inside the pressure hull with 100 and so sailors. It seems to be fine. They're able to keep it under control. Yeah, it helps keep you warm. And by extension, like the habitat is say 20 Celsius, that keeps the reactor cold. So everyone's happy.
Just works.
Yeah, that's probably the correct model. But you do need a very large habitat to dissipate the heat. On the other hand, it's kind of a fun thing. If you run the math on like, okay, well, how much habitat area do I need to dissipate 100 kilowatts per person? It works out to several acres. So like, it's not like this is people, you got like a bunch of people crammed it like sardines into a small space habitat. You get to spread out like Montana ranch style. Because you need the area of that habitat to like radiate heat out of its roof.
Yeah.
At the low temperature.
What do you think the optimal habitat size for, let's say, 100,000 person colony like Elon is aiming for is going to be?
Oh, like 500 square miles.
500 square miles.
Huge.
Yeah.
You got farms and factories and forests and ski slopes and all kinds of stuff under the dome.
Ski slope on Mars.
500 square miles is a lot. That's like the size of LA Basin. It's like a large area. The LA Basin's like 10 million people, so there's still plenty of room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Which starship are you going to be on?
Might need a fake ID to get on. I'm not sure. We'll see.
Yeah,
I'd be willing to go.
Free consulting for Elon.
Yeah, I've definitely been carrying water for that project for a long time. I think it would be a pretty neat thing to do. I don't think I necessarily have the skills or physical fitness to be on the first one, but we'll see.
Is this why you train rock climbing? Just
I've always liked rock climbing. Yeah, my kids like rock climbing. You take your kids to the gym. I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and you put them in a harness, and then it's like socially acceptable to like strap them to the wall, and you go and get a coffee, and they can't escape because their hands are too small to operate the carabiner.
How many times have you done this?
Yesterday. And like if I had the baby with me, I can't climb. But if I don't have the baby, I'll get strapped in and say, "Hey, it's easy." Like, yeah, it's easy if you're 6 feet tall.
Amazing.
Rock climbing's good, great exercise. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone should do it.
When did you get into it?
I don't know, early teens. Yeah, I was never very good, but throughout my teens, I do a lot of free soloing. And then when I was
Really
18 or 19, I had a near miss, and I was like, "This is dumber than I thought."
When you
Now I
say
use a
near
rope.
miss, like you almost
I ripped
fell.
off a hold when I was like 10 meters off the ground, in like the middle of nowhere. 5 hours hike from the nearest person.
Did you fall 30 feet?
No. I like instinctually grabbed another hold before I even realized what had happened. And at that moment, I realized evolution is true. And my ancestors survived millions of years jumping around in trees.
So you think there's like an alternative universe where Casey Handmer just...
Oh, many, many, many of them. Yeah. I had a few close calls over the years.
What about the near misses? Tell me about the near misses.
I did some sketchy stuff in Russia when I was in my late teens and early 20s. Like hiking through forests in the middle of winter when it was like 20 degrees below.
You read the books on like, the marshes and you didn't take any lessons from them whatsoever.
No, I read some memoirs by a friend of mine. He's a friend now. His name is Vladimir Dinets. He's a zoologist who grew up in the Soviet Union and did much the same thing when he was the same age, except he had the benefit of being able to speak Russian.
Right.
And I decided to go out there and check it out for myself. And there's this nature park just outside of Krasnoyarsk called Stolby or something like that. Stolby means pillars, but it's got these incredible granite formations that are actually very popular amongst the local rock climbers. But like dozens and dozens of climbers have died there because they don't use ropes because like, I guess they didn't have nylon until recently. I don't know. I was going out there. I climbed erupting volcanoes and all kinds of dodgy stuff, hitchhiking, like middle of nowhere, sleeping stuff. The most dangerous stuff, of course, is traffic related. I was nearly hit by a car that was sliding on ice in Krasnoyarsk. I narrowly survived a very bad car accident outside a place called Atka, which is a couple of 100 miles north of Magadan, which is in just like even if you read the books on the gulags, it's an obscure place, but it's kind of out that way.
Did you read the books on the gulags and then go out there?
When I came back, I read Valam Shalomov's works called Column of Tales and Graphite, which are not pleasant reads. I've never read Solzhenitsyn. But actually, I was more interested in the people who are living there today than the people who had died there in the 40s and 50s. It's very sad stuff, obviously. But the people who are living there today are really survivors. And they've just got this kind of grit about them. And I don't know, it's a tricky thing because I'm still in touch with some of these people and none of them are all that thrilled about the war in Ukraine, obviously. Some of them have since achieved the Russian dream and no longer live in Russia. But, it's actually, if you're kind of into the kind of what does an anarchic situation look like? There's few places on earth that are better than the Russian Far East because it's so far from Moscow and so neglected by Moscow that essentially there's no rule of law. There's no nothing. There's no infrastructure. There's just like...
It's pure outdoorsman,
It's mostly indigenous people because like a lot of Russians moved out there in like the Dalstroy era in the 60s and 70s, but then a lot of them have since moved on or moved to the big cities. So the only people who are left are like, probably I'd say like half to 2/3 of indigenous people that's where they're from. They speak Russian and they drive Russian vehicles, but they look kind of Mongolian.
I know you mentioned that basically history, people really overestimate how nice the past was. And
some people do. Yeah. The people who tweet about Marxism and socialism from their iPhones.
If you had to be teleported back, let's say to any point in history of the last 1,000 years, or maybe even 2,000 years, what would that point in history be? And what would the profession or thing that would you try to be a business magnate?
I don't want to go.
What would you do?
Well, I mean, yesterday, maybe. Okay. Well, I mean, I can understand that the past kind of sucks, right? At the same time, if I'm going back some amount of time, you could make an argument that you should go back as far as you can and still have a positive impact. So, for example, there's an outside chance that if I was teleported back into the Roman Empire, that having studied a bit of Latin and science and biology, and if I found myself in Italy, let's say instead of like what is now California, I may be able to teach them about like germ theory of disease and antiseptic treatment and gunpowder and steam engines.
Skip a few
and
tens of millions of deaths.
Stuff. The thing is, the ancient Romans, I think Samo Buria has a couple of blogs about this, but the ancient Romans, in principle, had the technology to industrialize. They did coal mining on industrial scale. They had steam engines. They were able to build steam boilers, but they weren't using steam boilers to pump water out of mines. And part of the reason is they actually preferred, and this happened, there's a number of cases we know historically of entrepreneurs being executed by the emperor because they disrupted, like inventors, because they disrupted the status quo.
Yeah.
And also in the late empire, there were a series of fairly serious economic problems that were not very well understood at the time. And I could be like, oh, this is Keynesianism. And they're like, what the fuck does Keynesianism mean? But like, yeah, essentially like at that time, they were still getting money out of holes in the ground. And so it was not that difficult to end up in a situation where you had an imbalance between the amount of liquidity in the economy and the amount of productive capacity of the economy, especially because they didn't have ammonia. So they couldn't make fertilizers. So they're kind of, you're building wealth on top of a slave agrarian economy that is facing sharply diminishing returns over time because of nitrogen depletion in the soil. Amongst other major structural problems associated with the Roman Empire. But anyway, you could go back and take a crack at it. But many people have examined this idea in literature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So flipping it, you go forward up to 1,000 years.
As far as possible.
As far as possible.
Yeah.
And what would you do?
When I get there?
Yeah.
I'll probably be like rendered into atoms and then uploaded to the cloud. I don't know. Be like, oh, we found another one. They keep sending them forward in time.
Just freeze you? Would you?
No, but I think there's a good chance that we'll figure out immortality. Like you and I might live to another 1,000 years if we're very lucky.
That's my bet. That's the goal.
Cross fingers.
Cross fingers.
Yeah. If you knew that was going to happen, right? If you knew we were going to reach longevity escape velocity in 2030, what would you do differently?
I'd actually do nothing differently. I don't think so. I'd stay fit. I would continue trying to move up the power scale as fast as possible. Continue trying to influence more people to go into building interesting, useful companies.
Like drive a little bit more defensively or something like that. I don't know.
So I already don't I try not to drive. I try not to, there's this funny dynamic.
180-mile Uber trips.
Those are for the lore. So.
I understand. That was like, it's a funny thing because I think, well, maybe I should drive more defensively, but I actually think that like if you look at the people driving in general, they're just driving however they want to at that moment. There's like very few people's actions on a day-to-day basis are informed by like deep interrogation of what their life might be like in 30 years time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting puzzle.
I also think that people really like misunderstand risk, and they take a lot of risks
Yeah, for sure.
that are unknown, and then other things that are not risky at all, they're like, I'm never doing that.
They take wildly misbalanced things. Speaking to someone the other day, and they were saying, "Oh, you concerned about microplastics or like exposure to, like inorganic food or something?" And I was like, "I'm sure it's not good for me, but I live in Los Angeles. I mean, I choose to live in Los Angeles. This is a super fun site where we are here right now. Like, I
You live in a
inhale,
castle, basically.
I inhale, car exhaust. And I think if you live in a place where you inhale car exhaust, like, probably shouldn't smoke or drink too much, but like all that other hyper optimization in terms of inputs probably doesn't matter all that much. You do better just by like getting some regular exercise and sleep and having good friends.
I mean, there was like a 30-year period or longer that we were inhaling lead gasoline everywhere. And like the entire United States IQ drop was like 10 points.
So the Zoomer reminds the millennial. But actually, even now, like if you fly a piston-powered aircraft, they're burning leaded gasoline. Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah. The FAA has had a program for like 20 years to try and replace it with some other what's called anti-knocking agent. And there are a number of ones that are available. The problem is they're not chemically compatible with either 100LL or each other. So once you can drain the entire fuel system of your plane and switch over to one of these other gasolines.
But it's just like
then you're committed to using that gasoline forever, which might only be sold at 2 airports in the whole country. So you kind of got this chicken and egg problem.
Okay, so how many flights are being done per day with leaded gasoline right now?
That's a good question. I can tell you that there are on average 4 general aviation accidents a day. And on average, I think general aviation will have an accident once every 2,000 hours or something like that. So that's probably 8,000 hours or so of that seems too small if you ask me. Because there are like 15,000 airports in the United States, and I'd say most of them have at least one movement per day.
That's not good.
It's not great. It's not great.
Thoughts on the 9 million leaded pipes?
I mean, lead used to be used to seal copper pipes in houses called sweating the connection. It's actually, I don't think it's that big a deal, provided that the water chemistry doesn't change.
Explain that.
Well, the pipes end up with kind of an internal patina layer of like carbonates and other crap. And this is what happened in Flint. It's also happened in my neighborhood, that they changed their water source because of a drought or something like that. And the new water source had a different chemistry, and it like dissolved the pre-existing pipe coating before laying down its own one. And in doing so, like removed that patina and exposed. So what happened in my neighborhood was not so much lead, but all the pipes, which were galvanized iron, just like spontaneously rusted through. So think of the money the local water district saved by like sourcing their water from the California aqueduct for a year instead of getting it out of the aquifer. They had to replace all the pipes with plastic ones. So much better. And a finely divided mix of gravel. Anyway, so that's the, but obviously we shouldn't use leaded pipes if we can afford it. It's actually kind of one of these problems, which is like the cost of installing and then maintaining infrastructure that delivers water and power and gas and so on to everyone's house is pretty substantial. I was in Oaxaca in Mexico last month, and it kind of broke my brain because it's a city of almost, 500,000 or 1 million people or something. And there's as is usual in Mexico, like a government funded monopoly utility provider, in this case water, called SOPA, I think. And its job is to provide water for everyone, but doesn't provide water to anyone because all the pipes are broken. And if the water overflows, they can't maintain pressure because the pipes are broken or people run them too much. And if you can't maintain pressure, you can't keep the water clean. And they've got wells, but the wells run dry because it's like a place that's in drought half the year and then rains too much the other half of the year. And it's just it's a tricky issue. Like most of the population in Mexico is at high altitude and most of the water's low altitude. Right? We can solve this problem with pumps and solar power, but they didn't. It's like walking around this city, and it's a beautiful city, don't get me wrong. And it's full of all this like grand old Spanish architecture. And I'm like, okay, the Spanish were here and like state capacity and like they ran it for like 300 years. How did they deal with it? Looked into it. Turns out they built an aqueduct in like 1750. and they demolished it in 1971. I'm like, ah. But then if
And
the
why did they
Spanish,
demolish it?
I think it didn't work very properly anymore. It didn't bring very much water. But like if the Spanish had water trucks, which is what they use now, everyone has a cistern under their house and they just deliver water by truck every month or so. And it's not drinkable water. You have like a separate thing for drinkable water. But I think if the Spanish had trucks, they probably would have just delivered water by truck.
There's an interesting graph that I saw from, basically it shows the startups formed in China from like 2015 to 2025. And for the first 5 years up to 2020, it's going from like, I don't know, like 5,000 or something, like 20,000 startups or whatever.
Entrepreneurship and economic dynamism was an acceptable form of individual expression.
Yes.
And then after that, it was not.
And then from 2020 to 2025, I think it's gone from like 20,000 startups or some crazy number of startups formed to like less than 100 or something in 2025. What do you think the like long-term ramifications of basically shooting their innovation, center, all the people that can build new things, in the foot?
Well, I don't know much about China. My impression is that the Chinese people are very entrepreneurial and industrious anyway. And so it may be the case that instead they're forming startups within flags of convenience, larger organizations or something like that. I don't see China necessarily following the same path that Japan did with like, as soon as their economy stopped growing, they kind of calcified in place.
Yeah.
And I also very much doubt that like this particular policy misstep will prove to be like China's undoing. I think there are others that are probably much, much greater.
Which ones?
Well, they have a looming demographic catastrophe. It's much worse than people are saying. China has almost certainly overestimated its population by 150 million people.
How?
Well, think about the incentives of the people who are reporting information on the census and to cook the books one way or another.
What is their incentive?
Boy Scouts was caught doing the same thing. Well, so there's this theory that in the United States, some polities are importing importing non-citizens to increase their voter counts or something like that, right? And then these people ultimately become dependent on the government and most likely vote liberal or something like that. Similarly, in China, federal funding at the province level is allocated according to population. So you want to say like, yeah, we had 100,000 births last year, we got 100,000 new people. But then you say, okay, well, how many vaccines did you administer to the newborns? And they're like, actually 45,000. Like, so you're telling me that you overcounted your births by a factor of 220%. Like, yeah, actually. So there's a couple of people who actually keep track of this stuff by like drips and drabs of publicly available information. And it seems likely that China has overestimated the population by more than 10%. And that most of that overcounting is in the younger age group. This is a major problem because, various worldwide economies had the challenges in the 1940s and 50s, particularly post-war. But by and large, they did not suffer from an overwhelming dependency ratio, right? Like, sure, baby boomers had a lot of kids, but kids are not that expensive in the grand scheme of things. And they age into like productivity in 10 or 15 years. Whereas when people get old, they're no longer economically productive, and you can spend semi-infinite amounts of money on their healthcare and on their care and feeding, which I think as a society we should aspire to do. But at the same time, there needs to be a realization that like every dollar that you allocate and spend on non-productive social causes is a dollar that you're not spending on like cumulative economic growth, which is the engine that ultimately drives the society's ability to care for its sick and old, and also like controls the accelerator pedal to the future, right? And UK is in this situation now where like their economy is like something like 3 or 4% net growth per year, all of which and then some is sucked up by social spending, so that their economy is actually not growing at all, and their per capita GDP is falling, which is pretty dire. It's
not good.
Unclear how you get out of that, except if you invent immortality.
So the soft landing is just figuring out how to live forever.
Well, I mean, this is a kind of edgy podcast. Let's talk about it for a bit. What are the other ways you deal with this? You say we're going to put a hard cap on expenditure on the old age, that it can be it can grow no faster than the GP grows, and it can be no more than 5% of the total or whatever. So you cap it where it is today, and you say it cannot grow any faster than the economy grows. At least that policy, if you could make it sticky, right? So the boomers don't vote it out at the next election, right? Would align incentives between the old and the young to make sure that the economy grows so that everyone gets lifted by this rising tide. That'd be great. But if you don't have that, just basically this dependency continues to grow, essentially ad infinitum. Or you could have COVID 2026 come around, and this time instead of killing 1% of the old people, it kills 100% of the old people, right? But that would kick the can down the road because you're still generating old people every single day, and it would also make a bunch of young people really sick forever, right? We just got lucky with COVID that it didn't really affect children that much. But I can't imagine what it would be like to have like a really bad flu go around that kills my baby or something like that. Holy shit. Can you imagine? COVID was a starter pandemic, like warm up. Or we get fully automated industrial, like space, gay communism or something, like AI powered economic growth that exceeds the pace at which we generate old age and dependency, which is possible, right? Because the rate at which we're generating old humans is limited by the rate at which we generated young humans 50 years ago, which is limited by, the fact that it takes 9 months to make a human. So in principle, we could, if we played our cards right, get enough economic growth on the back of AIs to, and robotics to help cover that gap. But you still have a situation where a lot of these jobs are jobs that need to be done by able-bodied people. Someone has to pay them to do those jobs. And if they're doing those jobs, they're not building factories, and they're not, industrializing the light cone. They're not colonizing Mars. They're not inventing new medicines. They're involved in carrying jobs, which are important, but they're not high leverage jobs. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a really difficult thing. Or you invent a drug like Ozempic on steroids. Ozempic, I think, already seems to have the effect of slowing down aging by like between 5 and 10%. And that's just for like healthy people. Very overweight people or people suffering diabetes, the aging rate is quite a bit higher than the general population. And it addresses that too. So we get some drug that like slows down aging by say a factor of 10, then, the rate at which people might die might go from 100 million people a year to 10 million people a year. It's still not great if you're like 85 and like on death's door, but it gives you a bit of extra time. And maybe in 3 years' time, you figure out how to CRISPR you to like make all your cells young again. And then you can start aging in reverse. And then, you end up in this situation where we can actually fix a demographic collapse, and you end up like elves in Lord of the Rings who don't have children all that often, but it doesn't matter because if you live 10,000 years and you have a child every 100 years, you have plenty of children.
Do you think there's a reasonable way to incentivize? I mean, you have, soon to be 4 kids.
Yes.
What's your
strategy? To have more children?
Yeah.
I used to think, oh, well, you could in principle pay mothers enough to have children, and you could fiddle with the social contract a bit to make it less difficult to have children. So for example, there's some pretty good studies showing that like requiring car seats causes a lot of people to stop at 2 when they could go to 3, because just getting a car that can fit 3 car seats is a major expense for people. So it's true that car seats probably save on the order of like 100 children's lives a year, but they probably prevent on the order of like tens of thousands of children being born every year, which from a societal perspective is a massive own goal.
The optimal move is to let the kids die.
In some places, what they say is you should have car seats if you can fit them, and if you can't, then do your best, right? Instead of this insane situation we have right now, which is if you have 4 kids crammed across the back seat of a five-seat sedan, or you have 3 kids in the back with seatbelts on and 1 in the front with the airbag on, you get pulled over, that child protection gets involved, and next thing you know, you're in front of a judge trying to convince them to like not punish you for being not so rich that you can afford a 7-seat SUV, for having extra children. Like who the hell's having children? If you're having 4 children and like statistically speaking, 0.01% of them dies in a car accident, you're still net ahead, right? Everyone's doing well. You're generating lots of future taxpayers. How about like additional privileges? If you have a bunch of children, you don't have to have car seats, right? That'd be great. It's just a matter of reducing these laws. Or here's an idea. If you run a child over, you go to prison, as opposed to the parents being arrested for allowing the children to be run over. Like it's this insane situation that if you're not like it depends on which area you are. In some parts of the United States, if you are in public and you're not an adult and you're unsupervised by an adult, your guardian is committing a crime. So we literally need to lock up the labor of one able-bodied grown-up person to supervise a 17-year-old person in public, just in case like they jaywalk and get run over or something. Like, it's insane stuff. My kids are almost 7 and 5, and as far as I'm concerned, they can walk to school together if they want to. But the local city has a difference of opinion with that. So that'll be a fun exercise, fun conversation to have at some point. But when I was 6, I was allowed to walk from my house down through a series of trails in the forest to the ocean, to the local estuary, and like sit on the end of a dock and throw a line off and fish, and like swim a bit and like play around and climb trees and come back when it gets dark. It's perfectly okay. It's very strange to me that like it has never been safer for kids than it is today in terms of like stranger danger or antibiotics or whatever, and yet we seem to be so short of kids that we're like, oh no, we can't let them do anything.
There's this interesting, I forgot where I read it, but it was something along the lines of kids do less dangerous stuff in like a dangerous environment. So if you create like a playground that's very sketchy with like rusty old nails, or not like this perfectly designed sculpted prison.
People over-index on like the extremal cases for sure. I mean, like I feel like my kids have plenty of fun at the playground when they go there and they find ways to hurt themselves, and that's fine. But yeah, back in my day, holy moly, it was like, people would break their arms on the playground. It happened on a fairly regular basis. But with kids, that stuff buffs out normally. They've got a lot of growing to do. They'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think Jeff Bezos said it well when he said, he has, I think, 4 kids, and he said, I'd rather my kids were missing a finger than they didn't have access to resources. And I feel the same way. My kids can use power tools under supervision.
I'm pretty sure that it was his mom that said that.
It was his mom who said that about him?
Yeah.
I think he said the same thing about him.
I think so too.
His kids, yeah.
Yeah.
And I hope his kids are starting hardware companies. That'll be
I hope so too.
The proof in the pudding, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, my kids help me with stuff. I taught both my kids when they were 4 and 6 how to solder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of them picked up the soldering iron by the wrong end. The thing is, if you learn to solder, sooner or later you're going to pick it up by the wrong end. It happens to everyone once. You're like, I'll never do that again. I feel like an idiot for 48 hours, and then you're okay.
All right, Jeff Bezos, thoughts on building O'Neill cylinders, and how do we get there faster?
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? So the space billionaires, Elon's all about Mars, and Bezos, I think he even was taught by Jerry O'Neill once in school, and so he's an O'Neillian along with all the other of Jerry's kids. And they think that the best thing to do is to build artificial high ground in space. And I've read The High Frontier, and I have a lot of respect for Jerry O'Neill, and we've also worked on a lot of the same stuff. He worked on GPS, I worked on GPS, he worked on a primitive form of Hyperloop, I worked on a primitive form of Hyperloop. He unfortunately died quite young. I think that the proponents of the O'Neill cylinder concept underestimate the convenience of having rocks right outside. Like infinite rocks.
The convenience of resources.
Yeah, raw materials.
Very close by.
Yeah. Now, when we go to Mars, SpaceX's prospective landing sites, which are like in the Flegramontes or thereabouts, we think they have enough solar power, they have enough ice, they have rocks. They probably have like a bunch of iron-rich rock somewhere. And if we're very lucky, then nearby they might have some other kind of ore, some other mineral. Maybe we'll get lucky, get some aluminum or something.
This is a bunch of gas or oil.
They won't have any oil, but
no.
They'll have to make it. But like, if you think like, well, you're setting up a giant factory, you need the ability to get all your different metals, right? So like, where are you getting your rhenium from? Where are you getting molybdenum from? But what we do know is Mars has a crap load of like undifferentiated basaltic melts. And so if in doubt, you can always just grind up basalt and then tear it apart atom by atom. We're actually working on that here, but no one else seems to do that very much here on Earth. It's much easier to go and find some concentrated, mineral somewhere and then build a mine around it. But it's kind of hard to do that on Mars if it's on the other side of the planet. Just for like a little bit of rhenium.
What's the kilogram to orbit on Mars with a Starship?
Oh, well, the nice thing about Starship, and the reason Starship's designed that way is it can do single stage return to Earth from Mars. Yeah. So you need about 3.8 kilometers a second to get to low Mars orbit, and then I think like another 1.6 or something to get back from there to Earth, which is not very much. You need a little bit more to land on Earth. I think it's like all up 5.5 or 6.5 kilometers a second, something like that. And of course, if you were prepared to do a low Mars orbital rendezvous and fluid like propellant transfer, then
So would the
it makes it even
optimal
easier.
path
You
be?
can ship stuff back from Mars pretty easily. Well,
Yeah.
in terms of rockets, pretty easily. In terms of like, well, you still need like thousands of tons of propellant to do it. At some point I ran the math on this and I was like, you could make a plausible argument that the Mars base that you build, even if it's fully industrially autonomous, most of its economic activity is making synthetic methane and oxygen to fly rockets back to Earth. Right? It's like all that plus some details on the side.
Amazing.
It depends how often people want to come back and if you want to send any rocks back.
What would you predict?
One-way trips mostly.
I kind of, my hunch is you probably have people staying for like longer than 15 years.
The initial guess, well, that'd be fine. The initial guess was that you would need to fly the Starship back to reuse the Starship, but then they switched to stainless steel. And you say, well, if I'm launching, say, 1,000 Starships to Mars every year, and I want to launch 1,001, is it easier to fly a marginal Starship back from Mars or to crank up the Starship factory on Earth by 0.1%? It is obviously easier just to crank up the factory on Earth.
Yeah.
And so most Starships that are going to Mars will go one way and they'll be scrapped when they get there, or maybe repurposed if they need to like launch satellites on Mars or something. One or two of them will be. And then once in a blue moon, people want to fly back. Now, you say after 15 years, that's easy because if in the first year you launch 100 people, in the second year you launch 500 people, or the third window you launch 1,500 people and so on, it's scaling up. After 15 years, you might have the capacity to launch 100,000 people to Mars in a launch window. And if all the people who went there 15 years before want to fly back, that's only 100. That's easy, right? It's a tiny, tiny fraction of your net up mass. But if instead you say, well, after 5 years, everyone has to go home for like, you're dying of like Mars disease or something, then that becomes a bit of a pickle because it's much harder to fly people back from Mars at scale because, well, unless you have like a giant civilization there, because there's no like Kennedy Space Center on Mars.
I wonder how much they cost. It's 500,000. I think that's what the Elon goal is 500,000 from Earth to Mars per human.
Oh, for cost. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And then I wonder what it is back from Mars. I imagine it wouldn't be quite the same.
Well, right now, NASA's saying it's going to cost them $11 billion, maybe more, to build Mars sample return, which will get 100 grams back. That's $150 billion a kilogram. And if you need, say, 500 kilograms to get a person back, including their consumables, that is 500 times $150 billion or something, $110 billion. That's $55 trillion. That's a lot. Hopefully we can do better than that. Now, if you are launching mass to Mars and it costs you $1,000 a kilogram, then it'll cost you $1 billion to launch 1,000 tons. So worst case scenario, you have to launch all your propellant that you need to fly home, 1,000 tons of it, back to Mars. That's $1 billion worth of propellant. That's enough to get, I don't know, 10 or 20 people back. So that would work out to, whatever that works out to be, $500,000 to Mars and $50 million back, something like that.
But then we can
But you can make an argument that you
build
can
all this shit.
You can make more propellant on Mars, maybe. But like, that's a big puzzle. You need a lot of energy to do that, like gigawatts of electricity to do that.
I think Isaiah talked about just shipping little balls of uranium to Mars.
Yeah, but you still need the whole reactor.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like we need a lot of starships.
Well, this comes back to like, okay, so you can fit 300 megawatts in a starship and I need a gigawatt to make enough fuel to launch starships back at a semi-regular pace. So you need 3 insanely cracked Starship nuclear reactors that like never break down that will cost you $20 billion to develop. Like it's a lot of money.
Right. Solar,
I think, is probably the key, right? If you want a gigawatt of solar, it's like cover an arbitrarily large area of Mars' solar arrays until the marginal price of power is no longer the main constraint. Like, just keep fire hosing solar at the problem until people beg for relief. No more, please, I beg you. We have enough. And you can launch a couple 100 megawatts of solar on a Starship as well. In terms of like just stacking up modules in the payload fairing.
on Earth, it costs so much to get to orbit that it doesn't really make sense to like drop batteries down from orbit. But you could like theoretically have, I mean, I think the atmosphere on Mars is such that
It's like 100 times thinner.
yeah, like how efficient are solar panels on Mars?
Oh, same efficiency as on Earth. The sun is about twice as weak because you're further from it.
Oh.
Yeah. But land is cheap and there's no like environmental protection agency stopping you from putting solar panels on the ground.
Here's a good question. Elon runs for president and he makes it about, I think, 5 months.
I mean, he's not born in the United States.
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
But okay.
Okay, sure.
All right. Elon runs for president. He's president for about 5 months before falling out, sadly. He realizes that, I mean, my read on it is that he realizes that there's no saving the like current system in America.
In regards to what happened earlier this year?
Right. That like he cannot, even through sheer force of will, force regulation to not basically just keep on blowing up. And he decides to switch from let's, constrain spending and like pay down the debt to, well, let's just, if there's a 1,000-foot tidal wave hitting the beach, maybe don't pick up the trash, just
surf it.
Surf the tidal wave.
Yeah. Well, I think he's keenly aware that like there's a pretty steep opportunity cost for his time, and that like AI is happening and it would benefit from him working on it. And that like in terms of the direct benefit that was being accrued to him, his companies, and to the rest of the country by him being involved in the administration, it was like diminishing pretty sharply as the antibodies against his interventions were growing. So like obviously there were multiple factions within the Trump administration, and some of them liked Elon and some of them really didn't. The thing that's kind of crazy to me is that like in some of the agencies where Doge was doing its thing, like the very, like, how do I phrase this? I don't want it to be too divisive here, but like, let's just say like the woke deep state, without loss of generality, basically teamed up with like the absolutely least woke aspects of the like anti-Elon contingent within the White House and the executive to like eject Elon from the process. Like they got a common enemy and they'll eject Elon and they can go back to doing what they were doing before, which is failing to solve governance problems at scale. That's not to say that like these problems are easy to solve, but they're very, very hard to solve. That's why they're not solved. But it does frustrate me because I think that it's kind of the same thing we saw with Jared Isaacman and NASA at a smaller scale. The set of people who have the necessary skills and experience to perform the kinds of government reforms that everyone acknowledges are desperately needed does not intersect with a set of people who would ever have interest in doing it, except in very rare cases, for obvious reasons, right? If you have those sorts of skills, you can make way, way more money as a startup or running a company. You can get more political influence even. So you kind of need the like hardware founder, psychotic determination mentality to like even bother trying to get involved in the government. We work with the government here all the time. We get phone calls and emails and stuff, and we fly out to DC and brief people and help them out. I mean, never with any expectation of like reciprocity. Not that that's ever occurred. We're good patriots. There's an American flag right there. We're here to serve the country at our expense and our investors' expense. And it's just, the problems are very challenging.
Do you think he would import my hunch is that he, I think, basically tries to quote unquote save America, goes into, gets into the thick of it, realizes that it's like an impossible task, decides to exit that, he gets Trump into power, so he's not, having his like companies strangled by regulation and like, potable water getting poured.
Or whatever by Kamala
it's
Harris,
funny when people say like we should nationalize SpaceX, and I'm like, there is a nationalized SpaceX. It's called NASA. And if you just like,
I mean, like you could nationalize SpaceX, but like the federal government already takes like probably 30 cents on the dollar that SpaceX spends, right? Like I just ran payroll this morning here. How much of that money actually gets seen by my employees? They pay income tax. I pay payroll tax. I pay unemployment benefits. I pay all kinds of taxes. Probably, I would estimate that less than half of the salary, less than half the total expense of payroll that I pay here as a small company actually ends up in my employees' pockets as cash they can spend in the economy on things they want, in the productive parts of the economy that actually drive economic growth. It's kind of nuts.
I'm not totally I'm not totally straight on why this is, but it seems like, if you ask people who do you think is better at spending $1, someone with $10,000 or an organization with like $100 billion, they will obviously say the 10,000.
Who's better at what?
Spending $1.
Spending $1.
Basically, who can more efficiently allocate the dollar in an economy. It's not really controversial that
like the marginal value of the additional dollar goes down.
Yeah.
As you get more money.
But then, and if you think of Elon and he talks about like government being a corporation in the limit.
Yes.
You basically have this dynamic where to drive revenue growth in government, you either inflate your money or just appropriate it.
I don't think the United States is quite there, but it's pretty clear to me that like if you look at the discourse in the UK, we need a longer table. If you look at the discourse in the UK, there's this real mentality that like anyone who's rich does not deserve it, and
it's
anyone
not only
who's
that
rich
they did something wrong
should be taxed into oblivion. And it's if you go and you build a company that's innovative and generates value for other people, how dare you? And so when they're perpetually on the brink of bankruptcy because they've never ever found any semblance of like fiscal discipline ever. So what do? Basically, their taxation department runs around, the kind of already pretty much like overgrazed, dead economy, looking for any sign of life, any sign of like dynamism or growth. And they're like, hunt, kill, destroy. Like, oh, like this like one remaining industry is like showing the barest sign of heartbeat because they're not paying their fair share. So we're going to slam them with some giant exit tax or excise tax or something like that. And then predictably that industry also like vanishes. And then they're tearing their hair out saying, oh, we just shut down our last steel mill and we shut down our last coal mine and we shut down our last coal plant and we can't build a nuclear power plant for less than 40 billion euros or pounds or whatever. Like, I don't know what's going wrong. What's going wrong here? I'm like,
and it's like the whole Terry Brenton, where he posts like, countries or places with like AI regulation and then not. And it's just like Europe is the only one. And it's like some proud thing. And then there's,
and it's like how many companies in Europe are
now we
making
won.
progress here? It's kind of nuts.
No one.
The thing that I think people often miss here, and it's a really important point, and that's why I'm going to bury it in hour 3 of this podcast, is that when a country inflates its currency to spend on stuff, it hurts more than once. It hurts everyone because inflation is a tax, right? And so that decreases the value of people's money, and it decreases their spending power, and it debases the currency. It hurts because there are millions of people who are employed in the public sector who would be more productive in the private sector, right? And so employing them in the public sector, which has really, really low employee turnover and dynamism on that front, basically just takes their skills and their capabilities and their energy and their ambition out of the private productive economy forever.
I think it kind of lobotomizes it.
And sure, there are some people out there who really couldn't make it in the private sector, and the public sector might be a great place for them. They can find structure there and they can do useful things. But that's not everyone. There are plenty of people there who really should be in the private sector, and they're not, right? So like every time the government says, oh, we're going to spend $10 billion building nuclear reactors this way, means that those people who could be building nuclear reactors in a way that's more market-driven are not, which means that the chance of them actually producing a nuclear reactor which is useful to the market is basically zero. And then the third way is that it creates this enormous distortion in the economy. So when the government spends money buying things in a given economy, it distorts the market. We see this most prominently in housing, right? Where like housing affordability crisis, which blows my mind, by the way. Housing has been around for 10,000 years. It's not a new technology. It's not even like all that hard to build. We just decided we're going to stop building for no reason and then act surprised that we have this looming demographic catastrophe and that people are spending basically their entire lifetime GDP on servicing debt for housing that could be built for a 20th of the price. So basically government policy around housing construction, and around subsidizing demand and around liberalizing the sort of debt that people need to borrow to buy houses ends up distorting the market for housing, which is not like the housing for ice cream. You know, people can choose not to eat ice cream, but you need a place to live. It's so evil. And it's just like one of the things about evil is it's banal. The banality of evil. It's just contemptuous. It's just like there's not even any thought applied to it. It's not even like intentional evil. It's unintentional evil. And here in this situation where like there's this just insane overhang of housing that we need to give people. You ask, why are people not having kids? Well, someone your age should be able to buy a house and get married and settle down and start pumping out kids. You know, and like it'd be easy to have 4 kids if you start at 23. How old's Isaiah? 24? He's got 4 already.
It's got to be 25 at this point.
Might be 25. Oh, he's past it. Quarter century.
But he's like a few standard deviations away from normal.
Well, by our era, yes. But by, say, 1950s era, when, you know, I employ people here as technicians, I pay them great money. There's no way they could afford to buy one of the houses down the road, which was a asbestos shingled, you know, a starter home built for, you know, they're not terrible houses, but like built for returning GIs after the Second World War, so they could have good jobs in the Lockheed plant down the road. And now they're like $2 million and up, right? It's insane. It's absolutely insane that we subject people to this, and then we act surprised that they don't have kids. And this is a major problem in the UK again. The UK is kind of speedrunning this process, that like the tax burden on the productive part of the economy, which is like, let's say people between 25 and 45, is so high that they can't afford housing, they can't afford children. And then the people are tearing their hair out saying, why are we not having babies? Like, if you wanted to pursue policy in pursuit of like increasing birth rate, what you should do is you should take existing people with young children and say, what do they need to get them to N+1? So if you've got 3, what does it take you to get to 4? If you've got 4, what did it take to get you to 5? If you've got 2 to 3, right? If you've got like some 38-year-old career-oriented woman who hasn't had any kids, isn't settled down, doesn't want to get married, doesn't want to have kids, convincing them to have a kid is probably a net negative from an economic point of view, because first of all, it's going to take them out of the workforce for years. So all the work they put into building their workforce, their work credentials for a while, is kind of like on pause for at least a couple of years, right? And secondly, like having 1 kid doesn't really scale, right? You got to have like 3+ to really get the economies of scale. And also like, just in terms of childcare and stuff, like multiple kids is more fun. They play with each other. They like playing with each other. All my kids sleep in the same room and they sleep through the night, because if one of them wakes up, they just go look around. The other kids are asleep. I should be asleep. I'll go to sleep. Right? If it's one kid by themselves, they're very anxious. Like, where are the other kids? Our children evolved to be around other children. Right? This is obvious. If you've ever like put like little like crawling babies in a pile, like little puppies, they're so happy. They just love it. They just like crawl all over each other for hours. They just stay there in a pile, crawling over each other, having a great time, like licking each other. Right? That's how kids are meant to be. They love it. They form this little gang. Anyway.
What has been the moment in your life where you suffered the most?
Oh, it's not that hard to feel pain. Like if you're having an argument with your family or something, holy hell. But in terms of like just like anti-hedonism, just like feeling like, fuck, I did something wrong. Like this sucks. What the fuck? You can easily get that. You can just sleep on your bathroom floor, man. I used to do stuff like that. So when I was in high school, studying for my final exams, I would do a practice exam every morning. I'd have lunch and then I'd grade it in the afternoon, just being like the hardest asshole I could possibly imagine, like taking points off as much as I could just to like make sure it was being perfect. And I got pretty good. I got to the point where I was basically acing all these exams. They weren't that hard. And I was like, okay, we need to turn this up a bit. So what I'd do is I just like sleep outside in like the backyard and just like shiver all night long.
Like no sheets?
No sheets, just like my t-shirt, which gets wet in the dew, and like a cotton t-shirt, just like miserable, just like tossing and turning and like shivering and carrying on, like waking up with like some godforsaken Australian spider crawling over my face. Anyway, and you'd wake up in the morning and you'd feel like absolute shit. And then you do the practice exam. And then you grade yourself and you'd be like, okay, even if I get the worst night's sleep possible, I'm still going to get like 89%. And this is going to be good enough for me to get into my chosen course in university. So
there's like entrepreneurs. Yeah, there's like entrepreneurs that will chew glass and stare into the abyss in order to, you know, achieve some end goal that like is meaningful pursuit, you know?
Yeah.
And you seem to just do it for the love of the game. You just
the scary thing is there are some objectively unpleasant parts of running a company. Like when you start a company, the people who come to work with you will be people who you love and admire and respect and often your friends. And that relationship will be challenged in many profound ways. Often it's your own fault. Often you know it's your own fault. And sometimes you still have to fire them anyway. and it hurts. It hurts. It's not a good thing, but it has to be done. The funny thing is, if you make a list of all the things you have to do to succeed, and you do them, you rank them by unpleasantness, and then you do the most unpleasant one first, and you work your way down the list, and you do them all every single day, you will succeed. And the funny thing is, after a while, you kind of get in the habit of looking forward to doing the horrible thing. I feel like coffee drinkers are like this, because I don't drink coffee and I don't find the taste particularly pleasant. But I feel like once you get in the habit of getting the burst of dopamine for like drinking that noxious brew, you just kind of get used to it. And it's the same thing, when I'm on a roll here, I'm just like, okay, like all hands, like, tell me the worst thing that's happening right now. We're going to fix problems. You can begin to look forward to it, or you're like, oh, I have to talk to like the 100th investor this week. Or like, I get to talk to the 100th investor this week. Like, that is so much better than the alternative, which is I'm still like some peon at NASA, like solving some pointless problem no one cares about, and hating my life and feeling that I'm not living in accordance with my principles, and I'm not embodying technical integrity, or that my company already went out of business and I already had to lay everyone off, or whatever. Every day I get to come in here. It's a privilege. It's a bit of a long drive, but I get to build this environment for the smartest, most ambitious people I know to like become the best versions of themselves they possibly can be. And I spend about $40,000 per person per head per month, all in cost, which is way more expensive than an undergraduate degree at even the top university on earth. So I tell them, like, whatever you learn at Harvard, do the fraction and then multiply. And that's how much I expect you to improve here. Like, at that rate. Would you like a 10% pay rise every year? Yes. Are you going to do the homework? Maybe. Read books. Get smart.
Jeff Bezos has this line where he says, anxiety doesn't come from doing things. It comes from a lack of action.
It does. It's also a terrific nootropic. Let's face it. Stress and anxiety are like, they make you smarter.
Yeah.
Up to a point. Sorry, Brian Johnson.
You like to procrastinate?
I'm pretty good at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm usually productively procrastinating.
Mm.
Yeah. So I'll have like, probably like 5 major side projects at any one time and like 20 more on the back burner. And so just depending on what I'm feeling or what I'm doing, I'll like dive in. So today there are kind of quite a few fires to fight, but I have a blog post on post AI economics that's like in the works. So that could have been out by now if we weren't here. And what else am I working on? Building a pipe organ. I was working on casting a bronze sword for a while, but that one's done for now. Simulating Mars after it's terraformed. That was going great. And then we had the big fires in LA and we had a power cut, and one of my checkpoints was corrupted, and I kind of lost motivation to work on that for a bit. Come back to it eventually. I don't know. What else am I working on? Writing some books, raising children.
You just kind of like, do you have a bucket list and you're just checking off the boxes?
I do have lists of things to do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the things have been on the whiteboard at home for so long that they no longer erase.
Yeah. The thing that I've noticed is I've got this like list of things to do every day. And a number of them will haunt me for months before I realize it's just not worth the effort, and I just delete them. Like,
yeah, sometimes you have to say, I don't think this project is going to occur this lifetime. Or sometimes you say, I tweet about them and I say, hey, does anyone want to do this? But actually quite often there's been some project I'm putting off for like weeks or months, and then I just finally do it and it takes half an hour or like takes 5 minutes. I'm like, oh.
I didn't order shirts, like Relentless shirts for the people that I've interviewed for like 3 months.
It's not that hard.
And it's been wet. I know.
You go to Teespring and you just like
it's been weighing on my mind for every day.
Do it now.
I did it yesterday. I was very tired, and we were on the way down from SF, and I just like spent 3 hours manually entering all the order details for all these different people.
Did you drive down here directly, or do you drive to Gundo and then drive over here? Because we're on the 5,
We did technically drive to Gundo. Well, I didn't know where you were. I texted Cody James and I said, you in town? He says he's in Colorado. I text you.
Okay.
And
I'm your number 2. Wow.
Well, I mean, you would have been my number 1, but Cody, I wouldn't say I owe him, but like, I feel like I owe him a podcast.
Probably.
We got to do a pod.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're on the 5 here. So if you're on your way out of town, unless you take like the 405 all the way up or something, like we're right here. One day we're going to own this entire block between here and the freeway and the train line.
Really?
Yeah, it's all M3 unrestricted industrial. So take it all.
Let's just end it on like, what's the extent to your ambition?
Well, I used to say I wasn't all that determined for me to be in the driver's seat, provided that someone made synthetic fuel work. But I've come to realize that like I'm probably closer to critical infrastructure than I would have hoped. And it is also abundantly clear to me that we can surf the solar wave, not only for electricity and for powering AI data centers, but also for pretty much the entire primary energy consumption layer of our civilization, which is the conversion of raw materials, typically mineral oxides, into, or ambient gaseous oxides, into synthetic methane, methanol as a precursor for all other hydrocarbons, ammonia as a nitrogen precursor, synthetic coke if you need pure carbon for industrial processes, metals. So obviously iron is by weight is most of the metal we make, but also aluminum, magnesium, titanium, and all the other non-ferrous metals. Desalinated fresh water, which we will need to complete the terraforming of the American West. And in particular, Nevada has no big rivers and that sucks and we should fix it. And the Salton Sea is about the same size as the San Francisco Bay Area and 110 miles of coastline that no one wants, that we could just turn into like
lush,
booming megalopolis, hyperdrive city, Southern California, with like lithium mines and magnesium supersonic aircraft factories and all kinds of cool stuff. And like an inclined plane canal from the Sea of Cortez. So you can just like sail your boats downhill into the lake and then sail them back uphill through a giant tunnel under the mountains to San Diego. And what else do we have to build? Cement. So we'll leave paper and glass to someone else because they don't involve chemical reduction, but all the others we'll take on. We've actually got projects on all those right now. So not all of them are like actively underway. Some of them are awaiting the right person to come here and lead them. So if you want to work on one of those projects, if you're just determined to be the person that figures out how to like bring titanium to the masses or do 10 million acre feet of desalinated water or something like that, then check out our job recs online and shoot us an email. And we want to be the best place for that seed to grow.
If they're still listening at this point, they're probably
they might have the pain tolerance necessary to succeed.
Yeah, they might be a perfect fit here.
Yeah, Terraform is a place. It's a place where we will stretch you and you will grow. Yeah,
it's interesting because names do end up kind of they come to pass. There's a surprising number of people that kind of assume that I would give up, even though the name is literally Relentless, and it's a little strange.
How old are you? 23? There's still time. There's still time.
Well, I appreciate your belief in me.
Yeah, you got time for the world to crush you. No, it's a good project, and I would say like the only thing better than like voyeuristically kind of looking into all the other startup founders is being like, these guys are smart, but they're not that smart. How hard could it be? Go to Stripe
Atlas. You telling
Atlas.
Me to do that?
Go to Stripe Atlas, incorporate, raise money.
You know how many
people, give them
corporations I have rotting in Delaware?
You've already got one.
I've got like 7.
Yeah, no, it's very hard to like de-establish one. Anyway, build hardware. The world's waiting for this stuff. There's so many cool things to be built. What are you waiting for? Go and build Golden Dome.
Golden Dome?
Yeah, why not? As Kennedy said, it's a project that will focus our efforts. That's just one idea. I don't know, these ideas are coming out of my ears. There's so many. Here's what I want. Right now, if I go to my computer and I press file print, there's a decent chance that the network printer will produce what I ask it to do. But if I go into Onshape and I have my system there all catted up and beautiful and I go file print, nothing happens because it doesn't exist. I have to export it as a drawing and then send it to some machine shop and then beg them to machine the parts and then have them come in and do QA on them and then give it to a technician and ask them to assemble it and find it doesn't work properly. Right? This is stupid. There should be a file print for hardware. Go and do it. Buy a factory. Buy 100 factories.
My goal eventually is to be, I think this is the optimal path.
Destin's doing that right now. Smarter every day. He's making American, see, that's what I want. I want a brand of like luxury American-made goods that are just like, everything is made of like 1/4-inch stainless steel stamped. Like it's, like Chinese stuff is fine and it's cheap, but it's like the thinnest thing you can possibly imagine. I want something like if I drop it, it'll break my foot. It'll kill the kitten, right? I want something that's like, if worst comes to worst, I can put this on the anvil and beat it into a car. Like I have that much steel lying around the house.
You want something that could hurt a baby.
I want like American quality is just like, this thing is going to survive the apocalypse. I could throw it off the space station and it would survive re-entry. Just so much metal.
You want a spatula that can survive re-entry? A
barbecue scraper or whatever, but just like a line of premium kitchen goods and just like around the home stuff. So I can, it's the sort of stuff I'd buy from my dad as a gag.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like send it to him, and he lives in Australia, and have like the American flag laser cut onto the handle. And like he'd try and pick it up and like he'd break his arm because he's like an older dude or something. Like, oh yeah, I need to like work out, get strong, like lifting these barbecue tools that like you have to have gone through puberty to be able to lift kind of thing.
Puberty capital.
Like, hell yeah. Like, can you just picture it? It's the sort of thing that Augustus would just like carry around.
Right.
Just to stay swole.
Yeah.
What are you waiting for?
On that note.
Don't disappoint me, man.
Boom.